So, welcome everyone to Game On #Raise the Game Remotely, the first digital panel by both the Pledge and Payload Studios. So I wish I could say give a round of applause, but I'll just do a little da-da-da-da-da. It's great to have everyone in the audience, but especially everyone on the panel today with us. I will introduce my co-host, Khally, who will give you a bit of a takeaway from her part.
Hello everyone, as Dom mentioned, I'm Khally and I'm HR manager at Payload Studios. So as part of my role, I also head up our diversity initiative, which includes these Game On events. So we've been running them for about a year and they're always free, they're always focused on diversity and inclusion, and they're always open to the wider games industry. So we're absolutely delighted to have been able to partner with Ukie for this one, and of course thank you very much for our panelists for joining us. I know some of you kind of stepped up at the last minute, so much appreciated. Absolutely. And much appreciated on that front. So basically we started running these Game On events, which usually take the form of panels or talks, because we really wanted to explore how we could support, promote and ultimately improve diversity and inclusion within our own studio, but also within the wider industry. So we've been very lucky to be able to host some of these events at our studio in London. But now obviously with the lockdown, we're very lucky to have been able to move some of these online and work on Ukie with this one. So we have some amazing panelists here tonight. We're going to have some interesting discussions. I'm not going to introduce them all separately, because if I tried to list all of their accomplishments, would be here for quite some time. So instead, I'm actually going to ask them to just briefly introduce themselves and their organizations. So Melissa, do you want to start?
I do. Bridie would really like to scratch at the door so that all of you can hear. My apologies. She has impeccable timing, my chief morale officer. Hi. That wasn't awkward at all. So that was just a real-time lesson in how to be accommodating of people with certain issues happening in work from home spaces. My name is Melissa Bachman-Wood, and I'm the vice president of studio for Jagex. We're a game company located in Cambridge, just under 400 people. And thrilled to be one of the founding partners of Ukie's Diversity and Inclusion Pledge. I've been in the games industry for a couple decades, causing good trouble, and this is my first adventure here in the UK.
Well, welcome, Melissa. Kate, do you want to do a quick intro?
Yeah, sure. I'm Kate Lindsay. I'm head of HR for Splash Damage. So we work on big franchises such as Gears of War, Halo, our own IPs, and we've just released Tactics last week. So that's exciting. It's an exciting and busy time for the studio. We're based in Bromley. I've been there about 3 years, but I've worked in sort of creative industries for about 12 years. For me, I'm a big flexible working and well-being advocate. I guess that's my go-to. So that's why I'm here to hopefully bring today.
Well, thank you for joining us. And finally, Mary Claire.
Yeah, hi, good evening, everyone. I'm the CEO of Women in Games, a not-for-profit organisation who for the last 10 years have been working to create a more diverse and inclusive games industry. Alongside that role, I'm also a consultant and a researcher in the fields of gender equality, education and creativity.
Amazing. Well, thank you very much for all joining us. Just before we start going into the proper questions, for everyone who's watching, there should be a Q&A box somewhere near the bottom of your screen. Dom's going to be moderating any questions from the audience, so if you do have questions that pop up during the course of the panel, please pop them in there. Once we're finished with our kind of assigned questions, we'll have left some time at the end to hopefully get through some of those. So please do pop them in there and continue using the chat if you like to comment or connect that way. But for now, we're going to kick off. So the first question that we've got is related to kind of the current situation. And I think we've all had to face some challenges recently from Payload's perspective. We've gone from going to the office every day to working remotely pretty much overnight. So panelists, could you tell us a little bit about the general impact that the COVID lockdown has had in your organisations, and also specifically if it's had any impact on diversity and inclusion initiatives? So Mary Claire, did you want to start with that one?
Yeah, I will. I mean, Women in Games is obviously it's a very small not-for-profit organisation. So I think some of the things that we've experienced will be very different from, say, you know, a big game studio. But I think the core things have been, I mean, we're all part-time, and we had been working remotely, but as a team, as an executive team of 5, we had been meeting every month in London for a day. So we would have a day together where we could actually really just, you know, face to face discuss some of the things and also set out some of the strategic goals for Women in Games. Now, obviously, we're not doing that anymore. So we're doing that remotely. And that you know, that is working. We're having the meetings. That is working. We've also been running advisory board meetings, and they are around about 20 people. So I chaired the first remote board meeting for last month, and I did find that, I have to say, I did find it really challenging, because when I'm in a room full of 20 people, I can read the room really well. I can chair, I can do it, I can see when someone needs to speak or wants to speak, but I found it really difficult trying to see everyone, just seeing a wall of faces and seeing that, and I couldn't get that kind of interaction. But what we did was, I had a co-chair, so Gemma Johnson-Brown co-chaired with me. She did a lot of the looking while I was doing the talking. She was also checking all the comments coming in, and so between us we were able to manage it. But it was definitely, you know, required some teamwork. I think after having done this one, there are now, I can see ways of doing things and how we can prepare better for them. And then I think, you know, because I don't want to take up everyone else's time here, I feel like I'm talking a lot, but one of the things that I've also been thinking of, and we've been thinking a lot about as an organisation, is how do we, Women in Games, support women in the industry? How do we support studios? What things can we be doing? So one of the things that we've been looking at are things like how we connect with our ambassadors. So we started some coffee mornings, ambassador coffee mornings, which is a way of, you know, previously we might have met them at events or networking events, but now we're not. So how do we get that informal space where particularly women can talk quite freely about both their professional and personal challenges? And we had the first one last Friday. We kept them quite small, so we're having a lot of them, but keeping them kind of, you know, easy for everyone to speak and be connected. And again, that worked really well, and some very interesting conversations took place. So you know, we're 6 weeks of lockdown. I think we're, as an organisation, we're getting to where we want to be in terms of thinking about how the organisation works and supports the industry that it stands for.
Yeah, it's certainly a period of quick learning, isn't it? But I'm sure we can take some of these lessons going forward as well. Kate, did you want to chime in on how it's kind of affected you?
Yeah, I mean, for us, we're actually on week 8. We locked down a bit earlier, I think, than some companies. I think we just took that decision that it was not normal for us to work from home as an organisation. We hadn't really done it before. We'd been very studio based. You know, we're in one location, we're not spread out, everyone's together. So we kind of knew it was going to be a challenge from the get-go. So we kind of knew we had to be ahead of it a little bit. But that was, you know, kind of to our advantage. We sort of settled into it a bit quicker, especially before they shut all the schools, which has been fun. But for us, I guess, it's been pretty positive. You know, it's not a situation that most people have been in before. They haven't had to use, you know, video calls, or they haven't had to talk to their teammates in this kind of remote setting before. So, but I think doing it all together and all at once at the same time, you know, nothing was sporadic, nothing was in stages. It was like everyone go at the same time, I think was actually quite positive for us. And it really helped bring people together. You know, just thinking about impact, you know, we've got people stuck over the other side of the world. We've got people stuck in New Zealand, or like in Egypt, for example. They haven't been able to get home when they were traveling. at the time. So it's just like, how do you then make sure that they're okay and they're looked after? And we've actually been able to set them up remotely from where they are, just while they're locked there until they can return home. So it's just being adapting to the situation. And with that comes, you know, the flexible working side of things. You know, you've been whilst we've had flexible working, it's never been like dire need for it, I guess, as a studio. But now, you know, people's situations are different. You know, they can enjoy a 2-hour lunch break if they want to. They can start and finish when they please, as long as the work's being done, the trust is there. And I think that has just brought everyone, you know, closer together, and it's like brought a bit of camaraderie amongst the teams. You know, having that autonomy and that trust has been really important. I think that has sort of what's really shone through, actually, through this lockdown. So whilst it's come with certain challenges about, you know, how do you know if everyone's actually okay? Has anyone gone AWOL? How are you supposed to know? Like, all those sorts of practical things have been like quite challenging to sort of work out. And you've kind of learned along the way about how to make sure that you're checking in with people properly. But, you know, we've kind of got that nailed down now. But it was just more, actually, this is a really, really positive thing for lots of people. And I think it'll be interesting to see when we come back what that will look like.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Melissa, did you want to kind of cover it from Jagex's
I
perspective?
do, actually. Speaking specifically about, because our whole company, like everybody at Splash, we're a come to the office, be together, work together, iterate quickly in Cambridge group, and 400 people relatively overnight moving to remote working is an adventure, no matter what industry you're in. But for our diversity and inclusion initiatives, I think a couple particular things have been found out. Normally, we end up talking about how to accommodate people in an open office environment who maybe have trouble with being overstimulated by noise or light. And now we have the reverse. We need to double check in on our people who are extroverted, who are accustomed to interacting with hundreds of people on a day-to-day basis to make sure they're okay. In terms of some of our initiatives, like, for example, sponsoring parts of Pride in Cambridge, well, Pride's not happening this year. And other events that we're looking to do at several girls' schools, with several organizations that really are trying to elevate underrepresented groups. We can't do any of that stuff in person. It's just like Marie was talking about. It's really hard to get that message across, even not just reading the room, but just to be able to participate with people. And I think that's actually one of the challenges as we try to support underrepresented groups in the industry. So much of getting them in and supported in the industry is reliant on in-person networking and the support that you can get from being in a Slack group or anywhere else, where you just go, I was in the most bizarre conversation today. How would you guys have handled it? Those little touch points are really important. One of the things at Jagex that we've ended up doing is, because we have a whole lot more Slack channels now than we did 2 months ago, that's for sure. And several more of them are not related to work at all. We have one entirely devoted to our work from home pets. And we have a couple channels that are really just there to provide a serotonin boost. There's no COVID-19 talk. There's pictures of cute animals, all of that good stuff. Because we're really here to help each other out. And for those of us, so, I mean, I have my chief morale officer puppy, but other than that, I live alone. And for people who live alone, this is a particularly trying time when, you know, everybody's touch deprived and can't reach out to their community the way they normally would. So what I'm going to echo what both Kate and Marie Claire said, which is that, my goodness, the outpouring of the best of our human selves is really showing up very nicely here in the UK. And I'm so grateful to everybody in my company for having the same mentality, which is, how do I look out for my colleagues, because they're sort of my work family, and what special exceptions do we need to make to accommodate people? So, you know, it'll certainly focus an organization if you only have high level BCP, you know, business continuity plan, set up for your organization, and you realize you're doing it at a level that you've never really had to consider before. But everybody rallied around it. So I think that's good. We're just having to get creative now about how we continue to focus on diversity and inclusion moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that is a challenge. As you mentioned, a lot of the sponsorship opportunities and the events just aren't happening anymore. But keeping everyone connected, that's a real big thing that we've had to think about, and we've kind of found a few solutions to as well. But we'll talk about that in one of the later questions. So just moving on to question 2 now. So everyone here has been involved in the pledge somehow, either as a partner or a supporter. And so, can you tell us a little bit about how that's helped your organisation, particularly during this lockdown period? And I'll just chime in, from Payload's perspective. We've been really proud to be involved in the pledge and be launch partners. It's really given us an opportunity to take our events like these, to another level, and to share what we've learned ourselves, but also to think about what more we can do, and be inspired by other studios that are on a similar journey, and looking to constantly kind of improve their inclusivity and diversity. So Kate, did you have anything to add to that from Splash's perspective?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think the collaboration is the key thing here. Just looking to what other studios are doing, other organisations, and just learning from each other. I think that's really important. I think, in the past, games industries have been very singular and been afraid to collaborate together. And I think it's really the turning point is now, where we're actually able to come together and talk, together and have that one voice for the games industry. I think that's so powerful, and for me, that's what we're getting out of this the most, is actually we're not doing this alone. This is something that we can all work towards, and then it's sort of a unified pledge that we're doing together. And I think that to me is the most powerful thing, and that's the key thing that we're taking away from this, that we are looking at other studios and we're learning. We're also just acknowledging that we're doing things well ourselves as well, and then just looking at the gaps and how we can improve. It's just always constantly learning and improving, and I think that's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. As you say, I think that's so important, and acknowledging, I think, that it's not an overnight journey. It's not about just ticking a box or suddenly doing something. And it's wonderful to have this kind of central kind of, I don't know what you'd call it, central portal, I suppose, where
Sure.
everyone can share that knowledge and be inspired by each other, and kind of acknowledge that it is a hard journey, but it's one that everyone could go on, and there's things that you can do regardless of your studio size or your team size. Melissa, did you have anything to add?
I did, actually. I think one of the tremendous benefits of being an early partner in supporting the pledge overall is it gave everyone at Jagex a really interesting insight that they kind of hadn't had before, right? Because people will call us a big game company. Certainly Khally was teasing before we even started, it's well, we've got 25 people here and you've got 400. I'm like, and the Xbox team at Microsoft has how many thousands, right? So everything needs to happen on a different scale. And I think a lot of times people at smaller companies feel like they have to do things exactly the same way that EA and Activision and Microsoft are going to tackle diversity and inclusion. And this pledge has been a wonderful way to go, no, there are a whole lot of different paths that you can take, and every studio has to have their own approach and their own identity. Don't lose hope because you can't fund an HR department of 50 people exclusively focused on diversity for your company. Realize that there are things you do every day that can make for a more inclusive environment, and then how you talk about it can help you with recruiting into more diverse teams, which is better for your players. So I think the shared language and the breadth of opportunities for improvement have been really helpful for us at Jagex in starting a lot of other conversations, whereas maybe everybody on the front lines might have been a little concerned about it. There might have been some trepidation about what came along with it. And now instead of it's been used as a tool to remove fear. And I'm personally a big fan of that generally.
Absolutely, yeah. It's also been great for that, I think, and it's great to see how it's developed. And I'm sure Dom will be sending around some information, but for those of you that aren't already signed up for the pledge, there is a website that you can go to and read more about it, and if you feel like it's right for you, sign up and join the club, so to speak. Okay, so next question. So one of the one of the three pillars of the pledge is to create more diverse workforces. So a key part of that is obviously recruiting diversely. And at the moment, remote working, recruitment and onboarding has kind of had to take on a different form. So what do you think the biggest challenges at the moment are, and how can we overcome these? So Melissa, did you want to start with this one?
Sure, absolutely. So I think a lot of the same things that we touched on about, wow, what has COVID-19 done to your initiatives overall? A lot of them apply specifically to recruiting, because nobody is able to come on site for visits or get a general feel for the vibe in your office or what your studio's flavor is, right? And so everything's happening via Zoom, and people are reaching out through new opportunities, or people are now looking at different studios in the games industry for who is enthusiastic about diversity, who provides an inclusive environment, because maybe they're interested in coming to the games industry from somewhere else in technology, right? So you have to learn how to accommodate better and then hype yourself better, because that's a really key part of recruiting. And wow, crash course for the last 6 to 8 weeks, man. It's a whole new adventure, because we have been focused a lot on making sure we've got people from a whole variety of international backgrounds on our team, because when you want to serve a global audience, you have to have global perspective on your teams, right? Well, it kind of makes it a little challenging when you can't fly them in, and the home office is not going to be very accommodating with visas for anybody not essential right now. That's not even possible. So we've had some wonderful new folks had to delay their start times. And that's a real challenge for organizations to work around. And then we've had other folks who we've been able to onboard and start working with remotely. So onboarding remotely, anybody in HR, I mean, Kate, kudos, because everybody in HR is stretching themselves to the nth degree now. Like, here, it's your first day, you've just moved to the UK or you've just moved into Cambridge. We're going to have somebody drop off all of your equipment at your door. Here are your monitors, here's your machine, here's everything else. Here's your care package with some swag in it. Oh, if you've moved here, we've got your first 2 weeks of groceries, whatever else that is. So for us, the key to successful onboarding is making sure that everybody in the organization knows it's their job to care and participate, and doing all the extra mile things that you would never have thought of unless you had been plunked into this situation, right? So with every subsequent onboarding moment, just like you would normally in the office, you have to go back and go, John Smith, tell me about your first week and what we could have done better, because Jane Doe is starting in 2 weeks and we want to make sure that happens. So it's been quite an adventure, and it's a very busy time on LinkedIn and every other bit of social media, as we are all sort of, screen obsessed all the time. But that also makes it a good opportunity to reach out and talk about the positive impact that games have on people's lives in difficult times like this.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Kate, did you want to add anything from Splash?
Yeah, I mean, we did actually do our first remote onboarding last week, and it was definitely it was definitely a test. Luckily, like, there was someone quite local. We could deliver equipment, from a safe distance, of course, and get it all set up and working. And actually, it went really well. And I think just being over prepared, just thinking what could go wrong all the way, just helped prepare for the worst. But I think people are reaching out more on social media. People are talking more remotely. So actually, probably this new starter had more communication from a wider range of splashes than they normally would do if they were in the office. So for that person, it was great. They were getting a lot of attention. And we've got a visa application actually in the process at the moment for Canada, and it's like, it's just a nightmare thinking this person's supposed to relocate and and they can't know. But actually, just being able to set this person up remotely from where they are, and just in a different context is great, because this person's now, we're able to onboard this person from where they are, wherever they are in the world, rather than just having to wait and be delayed. They can still start, and it's just like actually opening doors up that we wouldn't have considered before, because it just didn't seem like it was necessary. And I think that is such a game changer. Like, you actually are other options, and now that we can actually do other things. And for recruitment, nothing's changed in that. The strategy's still the same, the commitment's still the same to diversity. That should not change whether you're remote or in the studio. I totally get people don't understand this, like you say, the flavor of the studio if they're not around it. But then no one's there right now, everyone's at home, so it's like, what are you actually doing from a remote perspective? And putting yourselves out there. So this is what we're committing to, and telling people about it. And I think going through the first process will help with that, especially with recruitment further down the line.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think they've certainly, as you say, opened some doors and some possibilities that maybe wouldn't have been there before. So in the same vein, I think from Payload's perspective, one of the big challenges that we've faced is the question of how we continue to create an inclusive work culture, and also how we really keep our teams connected. And so, for us, we've done something similar to Melissa, to what you were mentioning before in terms of Slack channels. We've got a Slack channel we have a daily quiz at 3 p.m. that people can drop in on, while they have their tea break. We've got a foodies channel. We try and run social lunches and just kind of try and keep that social aspect going. But we found it a challenge, and we're definitely open to suggestions. So I wondered if you guys had anything to add on that. Kate, I know you've done some work in the mental health sphere as well. Did you want to start with that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So mental health, was a big strategy for us, a wellbeing strategy we had last year, and it's just sort of continued within the studio. So for us, there's been lots of different layers to this. This has not just been like one training session will fix everything. It's looking at things across the board, that's looking at how one-to-ones are conducted. It's looking at how line managers are interacting with their employees, how they're escalating situations. We've done the classic mental health first aider training, which has been actually really, really positive. But then, what resources do you have available for stuff? Because there's stuff everywhere on the internet, right? You can go anywhere and access so much stuff. Well, what is your company really focusing on? What is beneficial to your staff? And I think that's where you really need to hone in what is going to be impactful and useful to your employees. So for us, what we've just rolled out actually is we're doing weekly wellbeing check-ins with our employees through our performance management system. So it's not focusing on like performance or your goals or anything like that. It's actually, what are your feelings? How are you feeling this week? I know it's looking at it from like human language as well. It's not like a 1 to 10 scale. What does that mean? It's like, no, I'm fine, I'm not doing great, I could use some help. And it's that human language, and then it's educating line managers on how they have those conversations and how they action things and how they escalate certain things that crop up. And I think the work we've done prior to this in terms of having a well-being conversation or a mental health conversation, just being open and honest, and it's actually okay to not be okay, just making those conversations less taboo. All that prep work has now enabled us when we're remote working that it's actually quite easy to have those conversations. There's no fear, there's going to be no consequences to you opening up about how you feel. It's okay. And there are plenty of resources to help our employees go through what they need to the resources that they need to get help. There's different avenues, not one size fits all, and I think that's what's really important. You've got to understand that everyone's needs are going to be different, and they're not going to be quick fixes either for everyone. Some will be, lots won't be, and it's just understanding that scale.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you pick up on something really important there, that acknowledging that it's okay not to be okay. I know this is something that gets mentioned a lot, but
Sure.
but for us, some people found remote working really positive. They've loved it. There's no commute. Freedom with their own time. But for some people, it has been a struggle, and we kind of try to communicate that's okay, and that everyone will be reacting differently, and create that culture where people can speak to their line managers and they can use the resources available. But that's increasingly important now, because we're not all in the same place, and you might not pick up on if someone's feeling a bit down, or if their behavior changes. Those are harder to spot, so it's even more important to do all of this. Melissa, did you have anything to add from Jagex?
Yeah, just love hearing all of that from Kate. That's just inspiring, because that's how you'd want to treat your employees on the regular. We just have a whole lot of pressure bearing down on us, right? So I think a couple of the things that we've done, because we also partner with some mental health charities, so we actually have some interfaces there even with our players, which has encouraged our staff to also be able to have those conversations. And to be honest, from a mental health perspective, I think there's pretty global acknowledgement that the entire planet is much more stressed than usual. And many of us are joking that hopefully we can all start talking about things like anxiety and depression a little more openly globally as a result of this horrible event, because we need it. But one of the things that, what we've tried to do to be more inclusive is make accommodations for people. Kate mentioned it's not a one size fits all solution. And I think that's the key to inclusion, is like, you want to include everybody, but that's not making everybody fit into a particular mold, right? It's ensuring that your environment allows all shapes and sizes and humans to succeed, not just exist, but succeed in that space. So, for example, parents who are at home, and you have my undying admiration, yes, because my girls are in their 20s, I am done with that part. And if I had to do homeschooling while working full-time as an executive, there would be not enough hair color on the planet to cover that gray. So, but being able to go, hey, James over here, he's basically not going to be online until 2 p.m. every day. And he's going to have a split shift. He's going to sort of work 2 to 7, and then he's going to work 9 to 10, and he's not going to work 8 hours a day. And who cares? Because one, I care about what gets done, not how many hours your backside is in your work chair. And two, what matters most is our people. And when you have that lens to examine everything in your organization, it fundamentally makes you open to having conversations about things like, hey, we're in the middle of Ramadan right now. And many people in our organization didn't even know what that meant, right? So coming here for me from the West Coast of the United States, I've found that there's diversity is discussed very differently here, but it's also a different reality on the ground. So what we ended up doing, because people didn't realize that there were folks who were not only fasting, but not taking in water during daylight hours during Ramadan, we had one of our Muslim employees write up a quick sort of primer on what Ramadan is about and why it's there and how you can be helpful to anybody who's fasting right now and what are some good ways to accommodate. And so we were able to share that, right? So religious diversity is another way to take a look at it, but encouraging everybody you have there to share that with others, because we're showing off that we want to be helpful and inclusive, is really powerful. And that's one of the reasons that the Ukie Pledge is actually helpful, because if you don't have those experiences in-house, right, you can go get them from somewhere else, and it's a friendlier, collaborative environment instead of the usual competition we're always having.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yes.
And I think that almost leads on to our next question, which is more about if we've noticed any specific ways that the lockdown has impacted minority or underrepresented groups in the games industry. So Mary Claire, I know you had some thoughts you wanted to share on that one.
Yeah, I have got a few thoughts on that. I mean, I think that on a societal level, there is definitely some impact on women and socioeconomic groups. And we don't know at the moment, we don't have a full picture on how that's affecting women in the games industry. But, we do know that there's obviously at the extreme end, a surge in domestic violence. We do know as well that there is, mental health challenges, which we talked about. We do know that as people are, particularly families, as they are working together in one household, that women are tending to take still most of the responsibility for the childcare and the home teaching, and there are hierarchies in terms of roles, professional roles. So even if you've got a professional couple working together, you've got to think about things like, well, whose calls are most important? When are those calls taking place? Are there enough rooms in the house for you to do those calls in separate places? How are you all balancing that? And that causes sometimes friction and tension. So there are lots of things, I think, that are all going on in the domestic space, which has had to become a professional space. And it's very different, obviously, depending, where you are in your career and in terms of your family. But I've been getting a lot of correspondence from women, asking for advice on this, and also just, I think, wanting to say something about it. I think initially in the first part of lockdown, everyone just, you just get on with it, don't you? But now some other things are emerging. As a sector, I like I said, we don't have any, I have no real data yet, but I'm starting to gather some things in. I think another area for me, well, before I go into that, one of the things is also that gender pay gap reporting has been suspended for this year, understandably so, because you know, businesses have got to focus on some other things. But that worries me quite a lot, because what I've seen in the last 2 years is that impact of that's had on the way that organisations at a high level, at strategic level, have been supporting diversity initiatives, or particularly gender diversity initiatives. And if that disappears and there's no reporting, does that then just disappear? Does all the action disappear? So I'd like to try and find a way of getting a perspective from different companies and studios about whether they'll keep doing it even though they haven't got to report it, and hopefully they will. My hope is, yeah, I know you're smiling on this, so yeah, my hope is
Kate's raised her hand,
and Kate as well. So you know, then that's really good news, because it's been it's something I've been concerned about. And then another area that I'm particularly concerned about is education, and then particularly the lower socioeconomic groups in education. So, you know, there's a foundation which is called the Sutton Trust Foundation that looks at improving social mobility. They've just written a report about how the crisis is likely to affect disadvantaged young people, and it's pretty hard reading, actually. But you know, one of the big things in it is about the digital divide, so that families from low socioeconomic, they don't have computers necessarily, so they can't even, you know, engage with teaching online. There's not the capacity for that, and I think that does concern me. Another area is you know, even at university level. I've again had a lot of contact with universities and students, and the students are really worried because, you know, this all happened at the end of an academic year, so they're not fishing. If you're graduating this year, you know, you're doing that, all of this remotely. Universities had to very quickly go into remote mode, which a lot of them have done it pretty well, but the students' anxieties are about leaving university, getting a job. How will they connect with studios? Because as Melissa, you were saying, you know, often there are events, and you know, you would have you know, students would attend, and then they would meet potentially studios they might go to work at. So graduates had this kind of networking, but that networking for them really has disappeared. So, you know, one of the things that I'm trying to do, Women in Games are trying to do, is to reach out to those universities and those students, and to reassure them, and try to set up introductions of ways that they can get connected to studios, you know, because they are obviously the future, aren't they? They're the future coming in. And it feels wrong that they should feel that anxious about their futures. You know, they don't know how they'd be inboarded, they don't know how internships might work, and all of that kind of thing. And I think in relationship to diversity, it's particularly important that we not only, I know it's hard, but that studios don't just think about what they've got, but what's happening in that sector that's connected to them, where the talent is coming in from. So, you know, and I'm sure we'll get to that, but they're areas that I think maybe they're not on the surface, but they're underneath, and they're really, really important areas for us to consider, I think, properly going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Kate, did you have anything to pick up on there?
No, absolutely. I agree with everything Mary Claire said. For us as well, I think one thing that has highlighted for us is people who are maybe more vulnerable from a health perspective. So maybe those with disabilities, or just more vulnerable to what's going on in the outside world right now. I think that has been really highlighted for us as a studio, and making sure that we are looking after those employees in a more specific way about what their individual needs are, because that's you know, it's a lot of fear going on right now across the world, and they are really vulnerable people. And it's then, you know, what are we doing to make sure that they are being looked after in their own homes? And that's really a really tricky thing, to understand what their needs are. But that is something that I think has been highlighted significantly, and making sure that they understand what it is that they need and how we can support them with those needs. I think that's been the key thing for us out of this whole thing.
Yep.
Absolutely. Melissa, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think Marie Claire did a great job of sort of outlining some of the challenges for, you know, socioeconomic disadvantaged folks, right? And if you recall the census data, that's actually a big industry problem for us. The vast majority of our industry comes from middle class or better families, people who are able to go to university, etc. So there are a couple very practical things you can do that make it easier for people. One is bridging the digital divide, right? Send people equipment, pay for their network access, because that's a real challenge in certain areas of the UK. I mean, many of us are from, you know, the south of England, but if you get into a more remote area, getting access to decent web service or even 4G hotspots is really tricky. So as a company, providing everything that somebody needs to be able to do their work remotely, it sends a really good tone, but it also frankly removes a great deal of stress and anxiety from anybody who's going to join the organization, right? You know, I think the other thing that has happened is you need to have more conversations just generally as the industry, and the pledge has been really helpful in this regard. Pardon me. The pledge has been helpful in sort of helping us to go, hey, here is a link, a tangible link to resources that you may have, which can then be shared elsewhere, right? So getting people equipment, getting people access to bandwidth is really one of the things that can help break the cycle of poverty and underrepresentation in games. So it's practical, but when you have, once again, the lens of we want a really diverse workforce that supports everybody regardless of their background and who they are, it's quite easy to come up with those solutions. And once again, because I think we've talked about this before, when your organization is more diverse, you have more people who can spot the problems and go, hey, why haven't we fixed this yet, right? So let's kick off some virtual cycles, since we all feel like we're stuck in pandemic stress cycles right now. So some virtual cycles for our company can make a really big difference. And so I think continuing to talk about it with people who maybe didn't have it front of mind as everybody's panicking to get all their staff working from home is actually a comfort to everybody who's trying to do better in this category.
Yeah, absolutely. And you touched on the census there, which is actually what our next question was going to be about. So it's really, so the Raise the Game has obviously produced a guidance report. So for anyone, I think there's a few questions coming through on chat, but I'm sure Dom will share the Raise the Game pledge website, which has some guidance and lots of information about you know, tips and best practice for things that you can do in your own studios, regardless of size, etc. But obviously Ukie also produced their diversity census and the report associated with that. So how have we found that that's impacted our business, and have we found that the resources are a useful tool for making diversity and inclusion a priority in our organizations? Dom, I think you were going to actually kick off this one and kind of talk about the pledge a little bit.
Absolutely. I mean, already I'm absolutely blown away from everything I've heard so far on the panel. Like, this was not all preset, guys. This is all natural. So it's amazing. And that's kind of a big reason why the pledge is so important for Ukie, because like before, everyone, you know, Ukie planned the diversity census for quite a while. You know, it'd been in the works since the beginning of last year, and they talked to various members. But when it came to actually what is Ukie actively doing within the industry, it kind of, everyone had to take a seat back and be like, what are we actually prioritizing? What are we achieving? And we thought, well, we don't really want to be like, you must do this, you must do that. So the team came together and kind of thought, how about we make a pledge where people can just come together, collaborate and share ideas and really combine everything? Because obviously we need to be able to show both new and old businesses that people are able to change, people are able to adapt and become all sorts of different directions and pathways. And not only that, but ensure that talent doesn't feel discouraged about joining, such as, you know, mentioned, like Marie Claire and Alyssa mentioned, we've got to ensure people from socially economic groups feel that they don't need, you know, I don't need this much money to join the industry. If I have the passion, effort, and work hard, I can achieve it with the support of those already in the industry, or, you know, LGBT and other minorities representation. You know, we don't really want to build barriers. So the pledge has been a really great way of us going, here is a great asset for you guys, but actually it's not going to be built solely by us. It's going to be built by everyone who wants to get involved and share their experiences, because at the end of the day, I think for me personally, but also as Ukie, we believe that when you have a diverse and inclusive team, you just work so much better. Because, for example, we do a social every Friday where we let each team member organise it. And the amount of stuff we've discovered about people is absolutely amazing. But also, it's taught us...
Sorry, you're breaking up there, Dom.
Apologies. Hopefully you can hear me now. But basically, a social every Friday where we've been able to discover more about each other, but also the roles that we play in Ukie. And everyone comes from such different backgrounds. It's like, it's not just ticking boxes, it's natural responding to each other and really coming together. And I think that's why the pledge is important. And it's like making sure people not only are recruiting fairly and widely, but also encouraging, inspiring and educating others, while ensuring that we're striving to ensure diversity and inclusion is in everything we do. May that be from the representation within games to the smallest things, like an article, a press release, where it's like we're making sure people who have accessibility issues, you know, like blindness, or if it's like a podcast, like I'm hoping this is okay for anyone who's got hearing problems. If not, that's something that we can work on, and it's just amazing. That's kind of what the pledge has done for Ukie. It's allowed us to not only go, here's something for everyone to come towards, but it's also been able to allow us to go, actually, we need to prioritize certain things a bit more, and we're going to make that, the pledge is going to be our promise to do that.
Yeah, Dom, I think you touched on some really great stuff there, and we've found similar things in terms of you know, the idea that if you're talking about making your studio or your organization more inclusive, it's not just benefit to one group of people. It will make it more, you know, more positive for all of your staff. And the other thing that we've found really great is the acknowledgement that this is a journey. You know, it's a bit of a cheesy word, but you know, it is a journey that we're all on. And you know, if you're trying and you're doing a lot of best practice stuff and you've implemented changes and you're not seeing, you know, a immediate impact, that's okay. You know, it takes time, it takes effort, it takes commitment. And the pledge is a great way to kind of hold yourself accountable, but also to highlight all the positive stuff that you have achieved, as well as learning, you know, new things that you can do, or seeing what you know, studios and organizations of all different sizes are up to, because you know, everyone's organization is different, and you can achieve different things. The important thing to take away is that there is always something that can be done, you know, regardless.
It's absolutely, like, I think the key thing, like, even if you're a one-man or one-person team, like, if anything I'd love you to take away from the pledge is you can take practical tips from in there to be like, so, you know, for example, as all of our panelists have said now, the mental health initiatives may vary between each organisation, but the fact that they're even thinking about that matter and going, actually, how does this work for our staff? It can work for any, you know, that kind of approach to something can work for any organisation, no matter how size or where you are in your journey. It's just a matter of basically reaching out and being like, let me begin this journey. So
yeah, absolutely. And just one last point from me, and I'm talking a lot, but when we started these Game On events, what we kept finding is that, so we actually started them as socials, you know, for women working in the industry. And what we found very quickly is that there was a lot of appetite for change, and there was, you know, a lot of people saying, but we want more diverse candidates, but we want to be more inclusive, but we want to improve our work culture, but they just didn't know how to do it. And so that's part of the reason why we moved more into talks and panels, you know, trying to cover some of that practical information. But then now the pledge, you know, there is that source, there's somewhere that people can start and people can go and get ideas about all of the really simple, well, some really simple, some more complicated, but, you know, all of the things that we can do, you know, as individuals, but also as studios and organizations. So it's been really, really great from that perspective. Did any of our panelists have anything to add to that? I think we've spoken for a bit on it, but
no. One of the things that occurred to me, this is really to Khally and Dom as well, is how do we, with any impetus around the pledge and with what people are beginning to do and these kinds of conversations people are having and everything that's been said, how can that be collected and collated and then shared further? Because if I go back again to the educational sector, I think that some of these things would be really valuable for universities as part of their teaching program. You know, how does the industry, what does the industry really look like? Because, you know, unfortunately still often universities have all male staff teams, or the teaching staff are male. They're generally the student body is generally made up of a high proportion of men, for instance. Not always otherwise diverse either, depending on what part of the country you're in. You know, some areas of the country are highly diverse student bodies, but in other areas, then there's no diversity at all. So it's like, I think there are some lessons again, and they're not lessons, but I think there's some information that would be really valuable that comes from the industry and then is connected into the educational sector. And although we do a bit of it, and I know studios do a bit of it, but they're not doing that. That's not the bit that they're necessarily doing. And it's something that you know, Women in Games is very keen on doing, probably because my background is in education. That is true. So I have a big, you know, I ran a program for a degree program for 10 years, and you know, most people know this, but when I started it, there were no female staff and there were no female students, and I still see, as I go around the country, programs that still look like that. So some of this is I think really valuable information. So my point is really how will all of this really interesting information that's emerging and initiatives that are emerging out of studios who are connecting to the pledge and working with, but where is that going to be held and collated?
Yeah, I mean, we as a Splash Damage, we work with an organisation called Access VFX and Games, and they are committed to everything that you've just mentioned there, Marie-Claire. And it's about how do you drive it forward together to make sure that change is being, you know, happening nationally for everyone at the same time, and it's sort of seeped in then across everything that they're doing. So that goes from, you know, this sort of panels like this that we have, that goes from any sort of career fairs, that goes into the education sector, like you say, like making sure that whatever comes out from that stage, you know, the internships, whatever it is the same. So you're getting the same sort of experience and expectations no matter what studio you go to. So they've done it quite heavily through the VFX industry, and they're just starting to touch on that now in games. So I think it would be good for you know, more studios to start to join Access VFX and Games, and I think, you know, there's only 2 game studios in it at the moment. I think it would be good for us.
That's really good.
Branching into that.
I'm going to take a look at that myself.
I'll connect you with
Thank you very
Simon,
much.
who runs it. Because I think we should all join together, and that's how you do it. You do it collaboratively. I mean, you know, just from a HR perspective, there's a HR in-game sort of forum that we all join in, but it's, you know, it's hit and miss what you get out of it. And I think it just needs to be driven on a more inclusive basis. And I think if we're all saying the same thing, you're all going to get the same thing out of it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Melissa, did you have anything to add before we move on to the final?
You know what? I think I always have something to add because I love the topic so much, but let's manage the clock well and respect everybody's upcoming dinner hour and move on to the next day.
Oh, I have dinner at 5 o'clock now at my house. It's like it's 5 o'clock.
we are we are running a little bit over, but we do have one more question before we move to the audience Q&A, and this is really just a summing up question about what do we think are the most important steps or actions that we can take during lockdown, and is there anything we can kind of move forward and implement it into when we get back to normal kind of post lockdown workplaces. Melissa, did you want to start on this one?
Yep, I think we've given some examples in response to earlier questions. I think it's worth noting, if nobody has said this to you or your studio explicitly, we are unlikely to arrive at a date where we cross a line and all of a sudden everything is back to the way it was in December of 2019. So we're all going to be looking at various phases of things. We're going to have lots of potentially at-risk employees who need to continue to be remote workers for a while. So think about the things you're doing now, like Zoom sprint reviews that anybody can participate in and join into. Think about how that can be manifest, right? And so as game developers, we are inherently creative problem solvers. It's what we do all day, every day. So apply that to this area, right? As I think, in terms of the most important thing that I'm going to recommend to people is use the Ukie materials to arm yourself with facts rather than anecdotal evidence, because the facts will always win over your skeptics much more effectively. And two, embrace this whole approach, this journey, as we're calling it, with humor and inspiration. And so what I will share as a parting remark for all of you before I hand it off to Kate and Marie-Claire to answer, shared in our diversity chat about a month ago was a tweet from, it looks like Cass Marshall, who goes by our equine GG on Twitter. And it's speaking to how to respect gender pronoun use, how to address audiences effectively. And it says, the don'ts, ladies and gentlemen, it's unnecessarily gendered, it's overly formal, it's lengthy. Honestly, I'm already dozing off. But do use cowards, because it's inclusive of all genders, it's casual and fun, it's short and to the point, it's exciting and dynamic. If you can have humor and joy and whimsy in a lot of the goals that you've got, people will be able to look at it from a positive point of view instead of a negative, oh, here's another box we have to tick point of view.
Absolutely, absolutely. Kate, what's your kind of summing up remarks?
Yeah, I think this is just an eye-opener for a lot of companies, really, about that we don't all have to work 9 to 5, and it's not like one size fits all. We're going to have to really lean into flexible working, and it's, some companies haven't done that, and I'm not just talking about working from home. I'm like, people have lives, and if this has taught us anything, this is like, lives are precious, lives are important. Like, this is where we need to be, and this is what we need to be embracing. Work is there, and we're all passionate and creative individuals, and we will do the work and the productivity. We have to trust our employees, that's what's going to happen, and give them the tools and accessibilities to do that. That doesn't mean it has to be like standard hours. Like, just work out what individuals are, and we will work together to make sure that their working day is successful and productive. It doesn't have to be what it was before, and that's okay, and that's a good thing, and it's good. I think it's going to affect a lot of companies, especially when we start to transition back to studio life, which will happen. Work from home's not going to be forever, but they're going to be like specific individual needs from this. People all have different circumstances, and it's just accepting that and embracing it.
Yeah, absolutely, and building that into your company culture and the way you look at things, I think, will be really valuable moving forward as well. Marie-Claire, do you have anything to add?
Okay, it's never going to go back to how it was. That's just a given. And I think that we have to think about the next normal. I think we have to join up dots, look out of the silos that we may be operating in. I think we need to learn from others to collaborate, which has been mentioned earlier. I think we need to use this opportunity to innovate the workplace for the future. And what you were saying, Kate, about flexible and remote working, I've had so many conversations in the last 2 or 3 years with people about that in studios, and people telling me they can't do it, they can't accommodate it, it won't work. Well, if it has worked, you've had to do it, and it has worked. That should be a consideration. And I think that diversity and inclusion and gender equity and parity should be very much part of that vision. So we can use this moment amongst all the, you know, the anxiety we have about what's going on and the fear, which is connected obviously to the disease, COVID-19, and everything that implies. There are also opportunities in here. There are real opportunities to rethink the way that we live and we work. And that's what I think we need to take this opportunity to do that. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you very much for those comments, and thank you to our panelists so much for joining us and for sharing some of their knowledge and experience with us all. We do have a few questions from the audience. Dom, I reckon we've already probably got time for two if you want to pick. Yeah. I'm going to push it over to you to pick the two that make it. But just a quick note: if your question doesn't get covered, we are hoping to do some blog posts as a follow up to this event. So do keep an eye out, because it is possible that they'll get covered at a later date. Dom, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you. I was literally just about to say the same. So yeah, if we can't get your questions, I'm gonna take them, and then we might do an aftermath blog where we'll ask the panelists if they can answer them in written format. So do not fret. But let me get on to it. So my first of two is I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, Sunita. How do you think that the messages of diversity and inclusion can best be incorporated into the games made by developers? I.e., how do we ensure that underrepresented groups are depicted properly and represented in games?
Go on, Melissa.
Melissa.
Absolutely. So the key is not to consider yourself an expert in something you're not. Right? So the best game development allows you to check your ego at the door and go get somebody else's opinion. It's the only way you're going to represent different cultures, different people effectively and properly in your game content is by having them contribute to it, right? So ideally, hire some people into your team, because if you want to hit a global audience, man, have a global team. But if you can't do that quite yet, there are a lot of resources, just the people who are involved with the pledge or other groups with various meetups and events where you can get somebody's opinion. And I will say, while some underrepresented groups should be allowed to tell you, go do your own research, don't make me do your work for you, you are also going to find, pardon me, as my garden door is open, you are also going to find that people are eager to fix some of the errors of the past and to help you out as a result. So I think it's very important to go and solicit external feedback and have a focus on not making a game that just looks like you, right? I think this panel is a great example, right? We're a pretty pale group here. So, you know, I think if we wanted to get some more insight into building somebody from a South Asian culture into one of our games, you'd want to get somebody's input who's from South Asia.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think you touch on basically the point is, you know, have a diverse team, and that will help everything, I think.
Yes.
But interestingly, this is actually something that I think you know, needs to be spoken about a little bit more in it. And you know, we're actually planning a panel kind of around this and how you know, how we can and we should, you know, create more diverse content that's more inclusive, but also you know, not influenced by those stereotypes you know, that you do see in a lot of games. Kate, did you have anything you wanted to add on that one?
Like, totally echo what Melissa was saying, really. You know, one of the quotes that stands out for me when we were talking about our Women in Games initiative, one of the men said, well, I would just ask a woman what they think. I wouldn't just assume. And that sticks with me for, you know, for everything that you were just saying. I think it's just really important. Like, you can't just assume what you don't know, and just reaching out and actually taking the time to listen and understand. You're just not going to know everything. So that's the whole point of having diverse workforces.
Absolutely, absolutely. Mary Claire, did you want to add anything before we move on?
No, I think that's fine. I think what Melissa and both Kate have said, you know, I would just echo that. Absolutely.
Yeah. Perfect. Did you have one more question, Dom?
Yep. So my second question comes from Chris. Touching on Melissa's point on regional challenges, how do you think companies reach those at the most disadvantaged to get into the industry from poorer backgrounds, etc., during and immediately after the lockdown? More bigger companies are focused on their local areas, basically the South and London.
Mm-hmm. So I think that this harkens back a little bit to what Marie Claire was saying, right? Education is key. There are a lot of apologists, frankly, who want to tell you that the pipeline is the problem. The pipeline is not the problem. We're always looking for people in the exact same place, which is why we find the exact same people. So if you can start early, if we can reach out to all of the universities, but also the secondary schools, right? And make sure that we're saying, here are opportunities in the games industry. This is not an industry that is collapsing under the current global strain. It's an industry that is continuing and thriving in many cases. We're here to help, and this is a wonderful opportunity for you. That's the start, right? Particularly when you're able to effectively target schools that are elsewhere. Very difficult, because I saw there's other questions about the digital divide. Very difficult to reach those people in person right now. Everything is being done digitally. So when we are able to open up, I think everybody in tech, games included, should do their part to try and incorporate the global community into accessing all of our goods and products, right? So part of doing that is making sure that people have access to network at their homes and participating and lobbying for that sort of utility work to be done in lower income communities. So I think that's one of the key ways to sort of approach that. You have to start at the beginning. And then honestly, I think a lot of people are going to be open to full-time remote workers now, so that if somebody can't afford to move to, say a cheap little place like London, cheap, super, super reasonable cost of living, then, maybe they can work from their small rural community if they need to be close to family, or they just need to be there for a while. I think this is going to hopefully open up a world of possibilities, and we should be leading the way there.
Yeah, and I think as well, just to add to that, like it's looking at other entryways into the games industry as well. I think it's still been heavily focused on looking at the most elite universities and what's the talent that's coming out there. Apprenticeships are such a great way of getting people into the games industry, and I think we don't use them enough. We always look at skill sets, but there are other avenues to look at. Apprenticeships are one of them, but there's a multitude of ways that we can get. It has to start early on. I think secondary schools is definitely where we need to be focusing our energy on, and not just looking at the big universities that are just bringing out the same kind of talent, because that's what that's the socioeconomic backgrounds that they're coming from. A great point about remote working, because they can't afford to move closer, but even in around London there are different areas that we can attract. It's not it's not all wealth there, but it's just reaching out to people who never thought it was possible to work in the games industry, because they might not have gone to the best university because they didn't have the best start, whatever it is. But it's looking at different avenues, and as well looking at part-time workers, mothers wanting to get back into work and things like that. Like, what are your opportunities there? It seems a bit untouchable sometimes, and it can be a bit elitist, and it's looking at what else can you do, where can you open yourselves up.
Yeah, and I think I hope that this whole experience of the lockdown will open up some opportunities. Because one thing that we've in the process of doing at Payload is working with a secondary school and giving feedback to students on video game themed projects. So they're doing a magazine, and some of our team are going to give them feedback and provide some interviews, content, and just things that really won't take that much time, but it's kind of open our eyes to actually maybe we can't always host big school groups, or maybe we can't always get out and do that in person outreach, but actually there's a lot that could be done remotely, and I suppose that could also be applied to different areas. So we can and we should be looking, I think, outside of London, for those of us who are based in London, and moving events like this online is great as well, because I can see that people have signed up from around the country, whereas when we're hosting them at our studio, it's just London. So things like that, I think are the pros of going through lockdown, is that hopefully we'll learn that actually maybe online opens up more opportunities for people as well. Marie Claire, did you have anything to add on that one?
Oh, I just wanted to, because I told everybody earlier that I'd been looking at some of the work from the Sutton Trust, and this is the research that they've been doing on you know, education from nursery all the way through to internship. And you know, it's quite worrying, really, that research found that just over a third of parents with children aged 5 to 16 reported their children does not have access to their own computer, laptop or tablet, and to use at home. The report, which is there's no time here now, but it talks about a whole lot, and they've got a lot of statistics as well around what is lacking. And so actually, I think there are some practical things that at a policy and at a government level should be done in order to make sure that those households and those children and young adults do get the same opportunity. Because the thing is, if we are working more online and we are doing things more online, communicating online, inspiring people online and everything, we can't inspire them because we can't reach them. We can't give them anything. We can't, you know, and that is really bothering me. And I haven't got the complete answer to it, but I do think there needs to be some action and some campaigning to try to make sure that going forward that these young people do get those opportunities. And you know, Kate, you're right, it's not all about university. That's not, there are lots of other skills and core competencies that people can develop and have that would make them really brilliant employees, but they have to have the confidence, they have to know they can, they have to, you know, schools also have to be part of providing that kind of information. And it's not very joined up at the moment, unfortunately. So we've got to get it, I feel like, you know, it's a real campaign for me, Women in Games, to get it all joined up and to get some action in there so that these things change. But if you get a chance to have a look at this report, it's by something called the Sutton Trust, and it's just been written because it's literally been written in response to what's happening in COVID-19. So very valuable, some really valuable information in there.
If you
Amazing.
if you ping us the link for that, Marie Claire, we can include it in the email.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think unfortunately we're going to have to because we have run over a little bit.
I like that. Yes.
Just to let everyone know, any resource that's been brought up by our amazing panel, we're going to what's the word? We're basically, me and Khally are going to grab those links and make sure you all have access to them. And again, in that same email, we'll make sure all their links and their Twitters are in that as well. So you have the chance to be able to see what these companies are doing more personally. And as always, please get in touch with either me and Khally, and we can get you in touch with any of our lovely speakers if you haven't already get to know them, and we can do introductions. Because if this was a physical event, we could do drinks, but we're still, because this is our first one, so if we do a second one, we're doing like a digital drink.
Well done. Kate just won the evening. That's right.
Good.
But I really want to thank everyone on the panel. I want to thank the amazing chair, Khally, and I want to thank everyone who was in the chat, who's just watching, everyone who's still here as well. Thank you for coming and joining us tonight and really showing the power that just having a discussion can have in the industry. It's been amazing, and I've definitely, like, for myself, I was like, oh, you know, just going to know some things already. I'm just like, oh my God, I'm blown away. So I hope you are all as well. But I'll give my amazing chair and the panelists just one final word before we end the webinar.
Yeah, I'd just like to say thank you for everyone for coming along, and of course our panelists. You know, the discussion's been really interesting, and I'm sure we could all talk for another 2 hours. But thank you everyone for giving up some time to join us and our panelists. And unless anyone has any additional remarks, I guess we should call it there.
Oh, thank you all.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being part of it.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Have a great.
Bye. Have a good evening. Yes.
Bye.
Bye bye.